Welcome to another random walk down Mill Street. Today's class is called Achiנו Beit Yisrael Shema'u, counting the years from the destruction of the temple. And this is a pretty small, contained area of our liturgy, not a very broad topic. Last year, I think I had more than one class about Tisha B'Av. I talked about Borei Adana, and I talked about some of the other minhagim of the 3 weeks, and of the keynote. But today we're going to talk about one small part that happens at the very end of the evening service for Tisha B'Av here at Shereth Israel. If you haven't, this is my plug. If the Messiah doesn't come in the next 9 days, today was the Rosh Chodesh Av, then we will be observing the fast of Av next Wednesday night, Thursday. So there'll be no class next week, in case you were wondering. We will be likely observing this fast day commemorating the destruction of the temples. If you haven't been to Shereth Israel for the evening of Tisha B'Av, and you are in New York, you should come. It is different. It is unusual. It is theatrical, dramatic, meaningful, beautiful. There's nothing like it. Unique. So come. The synagogue is all draped in black. Everyone is issued a flashlight. Once upon a time, people would have been issued candles. A few of the old-time members still remember that. The melodies are amazingly haunting and beautiful, and everything is done with the kavanah, the right intention, the right feeling to evoke mourning for the temple. And remarkably, as I think I've spoken about in some other classes, it has changed very little since the 18th century. It's the same service, almost to the every detail. And tonight we're going to talk about what happens after the keynote. So first we have the opening of the evening service. Starts with a psalm. We have the on the Harot Bavel. We read the evening service proper, our beat proper. After the Amidah, we have Echa. There's the Kina, then there's Echa. And then after Echa, we have a few interesting keynote, which maybe we'll talk about another year. Some of the more interesting ones that you might hear if you haven't been before is comparing the night of Tisha B'Av to the night of Passover. Maduang Alechem Eda Kedosha, the Maduang B'Lel Pesach, comparing that to Pesach to Tisha B'Av. And another kina after that, urana. Anyway, it's really beautiful, and you should come. Then we have something unusual that I've spoken about, I think, when I talked about Kaddish once, but not in detail. But in the Sephardic liturgy, and at least in the Portuguese liturgy, the Kaddish that is read at the end is not the Titkabal Kaddish that you would normally read at the end of the evening service. And that's because we don't say the Kaddish Titkabal in the house of mourning, because we don't want this feeling that we have of pain. That's not what we want God to accept, and we want God to accept our other prayers. So we don't say Titkabal at all. We don't accept that God has, or we don't want to. We might not feel like we're accepting God's decree when it's so painful to us. So we don't say Kaddish Titkabal. But we do say Kaddish Tuhu Lecharata Alma, which is the same Kaddish that is read at the funeral service in the cemetery. And that's unusual in and of itself. Immediately following the Kaddish, the Chazan makes an announcement, and that is the topic for this evening's service, this evening class. So I'm going to share my screen, and we'll go right into it. Okay. This is, I hope you can see my screen. It says, Achiנו Beit Yisrael Shema'u, counting the years since the destruction of the temple. And I'd like to thank our sponsor for this session, Dina Fine, who is sponsoring this session in memory of her mother, Tzipora Bat Rina, Aleha HaShalom. So what I was telling you about is the announcement made by the Chazan immediately after this Kaddish. And this is it. This is what's written, at least this is what's written in the prayer book. Achiנו Beit Yisrael, ba'angavonotenu, va'angavonot abotenu, anu modim hayom 1,770 shana. That is from the year 1838, if you want to do some math. Shecharava mikdashenu v'nisrafa hechalenu. Al kein Tzion b'merer tivkeh v'Yerushalayim titen kola. Libi libi ng'achal lehem mengai mengai al harugehem v'anachnu b'galutenu hamara Shabbat mesos libenu. Nepach le'elu mecholenu nafela nateret roshenu oinalanu ki chatanu. Now, this is actually not this is not what we read in She'eret Israel. This comes from the Leaser Fast Day book. I don't know if they read this in Philadelphia, but they must have at one point, because that's the text that Leaser puts in. And this book was published, as I said, in the year 1838. And if you do this calculation, we're going to talk about that a little more. You get to the year 68, that it's been 1,770 years since 68 gets you to the year of publication for this prayer book. Should we hear what it says in She'eret Israel? It's slightly different. This is the way it sounds in She'eret Israel. If you pay attention to hearing the words, you'll hear that it's shorter and a little different. This is Bram Cardozo.
אחינו בית ישראל שמעו, בעוונותינו, בעוונות אבותינו, אנו מונים היום 1,890 שנה, מגד שחרבה מקדשנו ונשרף היכלנו, נפלה נטרת ראשנו, אוי נא לנו כי חטאנו.
And that's the way we say it to this day, very dramatically. Even sometimes Rabbi Rod does it even more dramatically than Bram did here in this recording. But as you saw from the Nisrafa Hechalenu, all these words are skipped until you get to Nafala Ater Roshenu Oinalanu Kichatan. Now, I did a little searching around the internet, and I found that other Sephardic groups also make this announcement. I don't know if it's completely universal, and sometimes the language is a little bit different among different Sephardic groups, but most Sephardic groups, such as North Africans and Turkish Jews and Balkan Jews, make essentially the same announcement. I don't know what's done in the Syrian Jews. I think it's probably very similar. Eidot Mizrach have a little bit different language. It's also similar in intent, but not exactly the same language, but similar in intent. Now, you may be wondering, and we're going to talk about this next, is the calculation. What year did the temple get destroyed by the Romans? 70. The temple was destroyed in the year 70 CE. This is not really in any kind of doubt. Why is it not in doubt? Because we know who did the work. You know, we know Vespasian was the emperor in the year of the four emperors, four Caesars, and Titus was sent as a general to Jerusalem in the year 70. Vespasian became the Caesar in the year 69, and in 70 the temple was destroyed. The Jews had rebelled against the Romans in the year 66, and the conclusion of that rebellion was in the year 70. We know this from secular sources. We know this from Josephus. There is no real doubt as to the actual year that the temple was destroyed. What is there a doubt, however, is what year that is from the minyan of the Briat Ha'olam. How many years ago was that year? How many years from the creation of the world was it till the destruction of the temple? And that's where we get some confusion, because as you see here, we know from many secular sources, one of them is these Judaic captive coins, who destroyed the temple, when it was destroyed, which was in the April of the year, or I should say in August of the year 70 CE, July of the year 70 CE, which was Tisha B'Av. But the confusion starts to become apparent when you use rabbinical sources. So in the Mishnaic era, there was a work composed called Seder Olam Rabbah. Sometimes it's called Seder Olam Rabbah Zuta. Seder. So sometimes it's that there's different works, but Seder Olam or Seder Olam Rabbah. Actually, Zuta is a later one. It's Seder Olam Rabbah, and that was a work written traditionally ascribed to a Tana named Yosei Bar Chalafta in the Talmudic era around the year 160. And without getting into too much detail, the purpose of this book was to determine when creation was, using all the traditional sources that we know of from Tanakh, calculating backward to figure out how old the world was. And that book, which has like 30 or so chapters, goes through all the different eras of Jewish history until the era of the Greeks, essentially. And if you follow that, as you can see on the page here, you have beginning with Adam, and all these years are given in the Torah of all the generations, how long they lived. And then all from after Noach, you get all these other generations. You get to 2,048 years from the creation when Abraham. Then you get through some more calculations, traditional calculations. We get to the Exodus from Egypt, which is 400 years later, in the year 2,448 from creation. And then Tanakh gives us other years about how long the temple, or the rabbis give us other years of how long the temple stood for, which was 410 years, the second temple for 420 years, and how long the Persian period was, which according to the traditional rabbinic calculations is, I think, 70 years. And you get this number, which ends up being that the second temple was destroyed in the 3,828th year from the creation. And if you use that number and you do some calculations to some other, a little hard to show it to you on the screen. Well, we're going to take a look. We can see it in Maimonides a little bit. You will realize that comes out to the year 68 of the Common Era. So according to Seder Olam Rabbah, if you follow this through, the second temple was destroyed in the year 68 of the Common Era. And the reason that it says that mainly is because it's calculating through what are established dates in the Talmud, not worrying about what it says in Josephus or any other sources. It doesn't say anywhere that the temple was destroyed in such and such a year, but it tells you that the temple was standing for 420 years, and they try to calculate it backwards from there. The confusion for these 68 to 70 years is really kind of minor, because it all depends on how you're counting these years. I want to show you a quote from the Rambam, which we can date fairly precisely. That Rambam was writing in the year 1175 or 1176 becomes apparent from his writings. He describes the dates and the dating system in his rules of Shemitah and Yovel. Shemitah is a 7-year cycle. You have 7 years of seven cycles of 7 years. You get to the Jubilee year, the Yovel, the 50th year. And in his halachot of how that system works, Rambam goes through the entire dating system. And at the end, he reaches a conclusion. According to what he had said before, which I didn't give for you, all these calculations, Shana zo, this year when he's writing, shehi shnat elef u'me'a v'sheva l'chorban, which is the 1,107th year since the destruction of the second temple. Then he tells you what that also is. Shehi shnat shmonim v'shiv'a ve'elef v'arba me'ot l'minyan shtarot. This is also the 800. It's the 1,487th year, 1487 year of the counting of the shtarot. We'll talk about that in a second. Which is also shehi shnat sheish ushloshim utesha me'ot utsha me'ot v'arba alafim leyitzira. Which is also, and this is how we can do some calculations. He's telling you what the Hebrew year that this was from the beginning of creation, and that is 4,936. 4,936. So if you take 4,936 and you subtract the years from the destruction that he says earlier, which he had calculated out prior to that, you get to the year 69, which is not the same as the Seder Olam Rabbah. And if you look at other calculations we're not going to get into, which are from Tosfot and others, you get to the year 70. So why are all these differences? Turns out there's three movable things. One is that Adam was born on the 6th day of creation, and so some people count Adam's 130 years having already had a year prior. So creation is year 1, Adam is year 2, and going on. So then you get another year in there. That seems to be what Maimonides is doing in one way. The other thing that happens is you are also dealing with the years of Shemitah. So Maimonides says that the destruction of the temple took place in the year following the Shemitah, which, as he does this calculation, turns out to be 69. Tosafot and others say, no, the year of Shemitah was the year prior, and it all has to do with the fact that the Shemitah starts in Tishri and the destruction of the temple was in Av, and how you count partial years. Not that important. What's important to know is that the traditional dating from the Seder Olam turns out to be 3828, and taken at its most basic level, that is 68. That will translate to the year 68, and that is why here in Sheretz Israel we count from the year 68. Now, that would maybe sound a little more complicated than I intended it to be, but I just want to show you that there's some confusion based on traditional sources as to what year what year since the creation the temple was destroyed. It only happened in 1 year. There wasn't a doubt of what year it took place. The question is, when it happened, how many years from the creation that was? Is that 3,828, 3,829, 3,830? And there are different ways to calculate it, resulting in some confusion. Now, the other thing that's very interesting, that based on this Rambam, is that there are different calendar systems. How many people knew? Today, everything we do, is based on the number of years since creation. So you write a ketubah, it'll tell you, the minyan shelanu monim po kan, it'll give you a year. Chameshet alafim, it'll be 5,000, how many years since the creation. This is 5783, if you're wondering. 5,783 years since the creation of the world. That's what we say. And that's universal everywhere you see that. But it wasn't always so. In fact, during the Second Temple period, way back when that Seder Olam was written, there were multiple systems of dating. The most prevalent one at that time was called the Minyan Shtarot, which Rambam tells you here. He's actually using it when he's just telling you what year it is. He gives you 3 ways counting from the Churban, from destruction, the number of years since the destruction of the temple, the number of years from minyan shtarot, which we're going to talk about, and then he tells you the number of years from the creation. So when Rambam is writing in the 12th century, he's giving you three different reference points. He doesn't just say the year is 5783. He doesn't just say the year is whatever it was, 1000 whatever. That's what he's telling you. So he's all 3 points. And in the Talmud, they actually give you different. You can use different references. So in minyan shtarot, which is called the counting for the deeds or the counting for the contracts, is the most prevalent. But there are others. They're also counting from the death of the king of Yehoiachin, which was done apparently by Samaritans until quite a late period. And there are counting from the destruction of the first temple, and there's counting from the Exodus. All of these are sort of parallel systems, making it confusing if you were writing a document, which is why the Gemara, or probably even earlier, sort of establishes the minyan shtarot. So the minyan shtarot is also known as the Greek calendar, and it dates from, it's the Seleucid calendar, which is when after Alexander the Greek, Alexander the Great, the Greek Empire breaks into a couple of different regions, and the Seleucid, which is Emperor Seleucus Nicator, starts his calendar from the year 312 BCE, and that was, from the monarch, the reigning monarch in the region, that got used, and that became the sort of standard that was used in the Jewish world for much of the Second Temple period. But that wasn't the only one, as I told you. Now, what happens after the Second Temple is destroyed? People start using another dating system, which was the years since the destruction. This was not really that new, because one of the prevalent systems before this was destruction for the years of destruction from the first temple, or the years from the death of Yehoiachin, which is essentially the same thing. So you have these different dating systems. Now, dating from the destruction of the temple was actually quite common until very much more recent period than we realize. In fact, you have it going all the way into the 18th century in some places, especially in Greece, and we have some fantastic ketubot from Corfu, which use this dating system side by side with the modern system from the creation of the world. And I have, just for one example, picture here of a beautiful ketubah from the year 1773, which, relatively speaking, when we're talking about these ancient things, it's pretty modern. And here you have, it gives you both systems. On the 12th day of Tishri, Shnat, this is the regular year that we are used to. 5,500 ushloshim ve'arba libriat ha'olam. That's the year since the creation of the world, 5,534. And then it tells you, Ushnat elef ushva me'ot v'shesh l'churban Beit HaMikdash. 1,706 years from the destruction of the temple. That may be rebuilt. And then just to tell you why they're putting it there, leminyan sha'anu regilim lenot bo po ir Corfu. So they understand that most places don't use this in their ketubot, but they're still doing it, and so they put that in the ketubah as well. That is how they date things, going from the destruction of the temple. Just wanted to show you that this counting from the destruction of the temple was common, and that it was being done from 68. Sure, we know that secular years, the temple was destroyed in the year 70, based on the counting of this common era that we're using. But if you're using the rabbinic years, it turns out to be the year 68. And that is apparent when you do this little math between the two: destruction, the year of the destruction, the year of the since creation. That being said, counting from using the date of destruction to count years is what was very common in the Byzantine era, and you actually have matzevot from Israel, as well as in southern Italy. There are matzevot like this from the year 400, 500, 600, which are counting from the years of the destruction of the temple. So and so died, they from this many years from the destruction of the temple. Interestingly, there were other dates used. So in the Bar Kokhba rebellion, they minted coins that would say year 1 of the freedom of Israel, year 2 of the freedom of Israel. But then when the Bar Kokhba rebellion was put down, we have found, not all that long ago even, this is from the Dead Sea Scrolls. It was a document that was purchased in sort of mysterious circumstances just in 2009 or 2008. But it is dated to the 4th year of destruction of the house of Israel, the Churban Beit Yisrael. If you can sort of see it up here, the Churban Beit Yisrael. And that is almost assuredly referring to the end of the Bar Kokhba rebellion. So this, using the dating from the destruction, it was common. And now we don't do it really anywhere except for on the night of Tisha B'Av. So what are we doing when we're reading this? Where does this come from, this date, this announcing of the date? Here we have from Keter Shem Tov, who he says it's a very nice minhag because this way people will feel how long the galut has been, and it will arouse in them the proper feelings. It's a good thing to announce how many years it's been since the destruction of the temple and how we are subject to this galut from this. The way he says it is the people of Israel are thrown like a ball between this empire and that empire, and we're just thrown around from galut to galut. And we really feel it when you count the number of years since the destruction of the temple. And then he says he tried to figure out where this formula comes from. Who was the first person that mentions that this should be announced on the night of Tisha B'Av? And he doesn't really have a good answer. He says he looked in all the books of the Rishonim. Who was it that first established this announcement on the night of Tisha B'Av? V'lo matzati shum zecher. He didn't find any remnant of who announced it, who did it first. But he did find in a sefer called Tikkun Yisachar, which is written by a man named Yisachar ben Mordechai ibn Shushan, who was a mathematician and a person who did calculations of the calendar and astrology in the 16th century in Israel. He was probably born in Morocco, according to Wikipedia, and moved to Israel a little later in his life. He spent time in Yerushalayim, and he spent time in Tzfat. And in his work, Tikkun Yisachar, he writes, let's see, the quote is in here somewhere. Nohagim b'Tzfat, v'gam shamati, this is written in the 16th century. Nohagim be'eretz Yisrael, sheb'leil Tisha B'Av, hashliach tzibor omed b'kahal, kodem kriyat shum kina. So unlike what we do in Sheret Israel, they have it before reading any of the kinot. The Chazan stands up, and what does he do? V'omer b'kol ram, he says aloud, v'hachrazah shel agmat nefesh v'da'aga, he has a painful announcement. V'omer Achiנו Beit Yisrael Shema'u, my brothers of the house of Israel, hear this. Umaka hu v'chol kahal kaf al kaf, and they would hit each other when they heard this announcement. V'omer kulam b'da'aga, everything is said in this sad, plaintive and sad way, and they would say Baruch Dayan Ha'emet. When they heard the announcement of the years since the destruction of the temple, they would say Baruch Dayan Ha'emet. Then they would read the dirges of the evening. So that's the earliest reference, the 16th century in Israel. And it's not done in Ashkenaz, so I guess it can't go back too far, but it is done in most of the Sephardic world. And then at the very end, he gives you the nusach used in London. And here it is. The nusach hachrazah, he came. Achiנו Beit Yisrael Shema'u. Hayom 1700 v'chulei. Shanim shenecharav beit kodshenu b'tifartenu nafala ateret roshenu oinalanu kichatanu. Achar kach mekonen al hechali, which is the kina that we read afterwards, in a very sad way. Okay. And you do it in the dark. That's the Keter Shem Tov. This nusach is much closer to what we read, not that long one that Liser had. We read almost exactly the same thing. A little bit different, but almost exactly the same as what Keter Shem Tov Gagin has. So I just want to show you a little bit the language Achiנו Beit Yisrael Shema'u, not the rest of it, but just that first announcement language. Achiנו Beit Yisrael Shema'u is familiar to us because we also use it when we announce the fast days. Not Tisha B'Av. We don't announce the Tisha B'Av on the Shabbat before. We don't. That's not done. We don't announce Kippur. We don't announce Ta'anit Esther, but we do announce after the Haftarah, before Musaf, when in the same place where you would normally announce the new month, we announce here in the Sephardic world the fasts of Tammuz, the fast of Asar B'Tevet, etc. And the language used is Achiנו Beit Yisrael Shema'u. Brethren of the house of Israel, listen. So where does that come from? If you do a search and you get the Talmud, this is used in the Talmud in several contexts, but the one that's most relevant, and they're all negative. They're all standing up in some kind of mournful or terrible situation. But the one that's most relevant is this first quote from the Gemara on Yoma. They're talking about who has the right to do certain avodah in the temple, doing the sacrifices. There were once two young Kohanim who were equal. They were neither. No one had seniority. V'ratzin v'olin b'kebesh, and they both ran up to do this job. Kodam echad mehen letoch arba amot shel chavera. One started to get ahead of the other one. Natal sakin v'takab lo b'libo. So, in an effort to be the one who can do the avodah in the temple, to do the sacrifices of the tamid or whatever, he stabbed the other one in the heart, and then the other Kohen lay dying. The young Kohen lay dying. Amad Rabbi Tzadok al Ma'alot Ha'ulam. I think Rabbi Tzadok was I'm not sure exactly who he was, but presumably one of either the high priest or one of the priestly officials, and he said, Achiנו Beit Yisrael Shema'u. This one has Shemu. Harehu Omer, and it gives the laws of Eglah Rufa. What happens when you find a dead body in the field? Ki matzei chalal ba'adama v'yatzeu zikeinecha v'shofetecha. The people, the leaders have to go out and determine how close it was to the city, and to who will do atonement for this death. Anu al mi lahavi Eglah Arufa. We had this terrible incident in the temple. Who is going to do the atonement for this situation? Al Ha'ir, the city of Jerusalem. Al Ha'azarot, and the temple officials. Who's going to atone for this terrible situation where the Kohanim are fighting over who will do the avodah? And then it says, Ga'u kol ha'am bibichya. They all cried. So the other examples I could go through, but they're not as powerful. But here you have a terrible situation in the temple where one Kohen lays dying from the stabbing of another one. They think they're doing good. They're trying to do the right thing, but clearly something is very, very wrong in the situation of the temple. And in order to grab attention of the people there, this language is used. Achiנו Beit Yisrael Shema'u. So this is the formula for announcing something terrible and getting people to pay attention to something very bad. That's what I wanted to show you here on this page. Achiנו Beit Yisrael Shema'u. So I just want to go back. I should have put this earlier, really. This is the dating system. The person you're looking at the picture here is Eliezer ben Yehuda. Eliezer ben Yehuda, who was the founder of modern Hebrew language, or one of the founders of modern Hebrew language, the revival of modern Hebrew in Israel. He was born, I think, in Lithuania or Poland, and he moved to Israel very early on in the 1870s, 1880s, and he works toward reviving a language that was only used for religious purposes before then. And his goal is very clear. He wants people to settle in Israel, Ashkenazim, Sephardim, people from France, from Germany, from America. He wasn't really from Russia, from Sephardic lands, all coming to Israel, speaking different languages. So he wants to create one unified language, and that he thinks should be Hebrew. What do you know? Back then, maybe that was not so clear. I think Herzl didn't think it was going to be Hebrew. And he works really hard, and he publishes a dictionary. And these are the volumes of the dictionary. And he dates them. And you can see on the bottom, Krach Rishon, the first volume, which comes out in the year 1908. He says, Aleph Taf Taf Yud Tet L'Churban. I don't really exactly figure out how he calculates this. This isn't the same numbering system that we're used to, but I think it's like 1,900 I don't know, 40, whatever the years are from the Churban. But the point here, not what the actual number is, but that he's dating it from the destruction. That was the traditional way of dating things. He didn't use them from the Briat HaOlam, he used from the Churban, very deliberately. But then a change happens, and you'll see in volume 6, which comes after the Balfour Declaration, which occurred, I think, in 1918, or 1917, I guess 1917 makes more sense. It says the 5th year from the Balfour Declaration, Shnat Hey leHatzarat Balfour. That's what they were doing in the 20s. Not only here, by the way, but we have, I should have copied for you perhaps, we have some tishuvot here in Sheretz Israel's archives and some letters that he writes to his family from Chaim Hershenson, who was a rabbi in America, who was born in Israel and moved to America, and he writes an important work about halacha, about halachot of Eretz Yisrael. And he also counts as, he dates things after Balfour from the year of the Balfour Declaration. You know, we say today, we talk about the Reshit Smichat Gulatenu, the beginning of our redemption. They must have felt it very strongly, at least some of the Zionistic minded people. And then, of course, that changes again once you actually have the state of Israel. And so the last volumes, which are being published after Eliezer ben Yehuda has already passed away, are being dated 2 ways, really, but Shnat Revi'it L'Mediat Yisrael, the 4th year of the state of Israel. And then they give you the secular year, 1951. The other ones didn't do that. They're making a concession, I guess. But you can see the development from the traditional sad dating of the Churban to the hopeful dating of the Balfour Declaration to the actual realization of the state of Israel. Maybe the Mashiach hasn't come, the temple hasn't been built, but really you see a very different change in the feeling of how they're dating documents. And just goes to show you how important announcing a date can be to your mood. So if I say, it's the 4th year, it's or whatever year, 70th year of the state of Israel, 75th year of the state of Israel, that's a pretty great achievement. But if I tell you that it's 2,000 years since the destruction of the temple, makes you feel sad, right? It has an effect on your mood. And that's exactly what it's intended to do. So now we go back to Sheretz Israel. On here, we have different formulas that were formerly in use. On the top is the formula that was used here in Sheretz Israel before the American Revolution. And it is in Portuguese. And we get this from the descriptions written by Yosef Yeshurun Pinto. And I'm not going to read because I don't speak Portuguese, but Hermanos, Casa de Israel, Oyid. En esta triste y funesta noche, He gets this whole announcement. It's long. It's more than what we say today, and it's different than what Liser had. Brethren of the house of Israel, hearken, hear this. On this sad and doleful night, there are so many years since our second holy temple was destroyed by the Romans. It's interesting that he specifies which temple and who destroyed it, and goes on. Nafala teret roshenu oinalanu kichatanu. That is the traditional formula, and you see it here in Portuguese. Cayóse la corona de nuestra cabeza, infeliz de nos que pecamos. I hope I'm pronouncing it at least somewhere close. Don't know. That was before the American Revolution. After the American Revolution, they stopped using Portuguese liturgically in Sheretz Israel. The only remnants are sort of idiomatically. Sometimes you'll have people refer to the banca or to the levantar or to other Portuguese words, but it was no longer used officially in any kind of announcements. And you get it in Hebrew. And here, interestingly enough, is something from our archives that I was looking at just today. A little piece of paper. Might call it a schnipsel. It's not that big. On it is written what the Chazan is supposed to say. And this is something that I have been encouraging Rabbi Rode to do for the last couple of years, but he refuses, which is to have it already printed in front of you when you have to make the announcement, instead of sitting there and calculating how many years it is from the Churban while you are reading, attempting to chant it. But anyway, here you have it written out. Achiנו beit Yisrael b'layla hazot. It doesn't say Shema'u. Achiנו beit Yisrael b'layla hazot hu elef ushva me'ot v'chamishim v'chamisha shanim. 1,755 years. So you add 68 to that, and you see whatever it is, 1820 something. And that is what this is from. If you are very careful, looking very carefully, you'll see that this is Ashkenazic handwriting. This is not a Sephardic way of writing Hebrew. The rounded bottoms, the aleph facing that way, and you can date to who the Chazan was at that time. I'm going to guess that this was in an interregnum period, and this is written by Mr. Lazarus, who was the most knowledgeable person of the Minhagim at that time, for the benefit of Chazan Seixas' nephew, who had taken over by that time, about how to make the announcement. On Tisha B'Av evening, conclusion of the service is in English. So that's what we do in New York, and now we come full circle. From the beginning, we had Portuguese, a different language used in the early 19th century to what we use today. And I'm going to close with what they do in London, because I think it's quite nice. In London, similarly, in the 18th century, they did it in Portuguese. A different text than we had. We had a much longer one. They had a very shorter one. Esta noche, this evening is however many years. Oinalanu kichatanu. This is a very short, much shorter formula. But sometime in the 1970s, I don't know the exact year. I wrote to some people in London, but I didn't get an answer. Sometime in the 1970s, they changed the announcement. They made it in English, and this is the way it sounds today.
Brethren of the house of Israel, on this unhappy night, 1,928 years, this is in 1996, have elapsed since the destruction of our holy second temple. While giving thanks to the Almighty for the liberation of the holy city of Jerusalem, we pray for dawn of the Messianic age and the rebuilding of our sanctuary.
That is Chazan Chalfon Ben Arosh, reading it in 1990 something. He told you the year. I guess I have here from last year, if you calculate it out. But this is a change, a real change, and it changes the whole mood. It starts off on this terrible sound, so many years on this terrible night we have since the destruction of the temple. But then it acknowledges that we are no longer completely in Galut. We have liberated the city of Jerusalem. We have a state of Israel, and we are praying for the coming of the Messiah and the rebuilding of the temple. And I think that's a nice way to sort of blend or acknowledge that while things have we are still in Galut, things have improved for the state of the Jewish people at large. And that's my presentation for you tonight. Come to Sheretz Israel, hear it in person, and realize that we are counting from the year 68 for traditional reasons. That's it. I'm going to stop the share now and allow everyone to talk. There we go. So, Claude, tell us what they do in the Syrian community. Do they make that same announcement? Achiנו beit Yisrael Shema'u?
Yes.
Same thing.
Exactly. And 68 also. 68.
They also count as 68. Most of them do. I noticed that the ones who calculate when you do the traditional chronologies to the year 70 or 69 are mainly Ashkenazim who don't make this announcement at all. But that's when they do their chronologies. They get to the year 70 or 69. But the traditional Sephardic announcing goes to the year 68, which is straight from the Seder Olam. That was what I was trying to present to you earlier in a nutshell. Okie doke, everybody. I see Solomon. Oh, this is interesting. Apparently, this announcement is not made in Amsterdam, at least not today. I don't know if it ever once was, but it's certainly not made today. And is that a change? Do you know, Solomon? Is that because of the state of Israel? No. Do you know when it changed?
After World War II.
After World War II.
Because in The Hague they didn't do it, and the Chacham Rodriguez Pereira came from The Hague. They had a fight about it. Not uncommon.
That's the minhag. Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I hope you have an easy fast, and I hope that maybe we won't even have to celebrate. We won't have to observe Tisha B'Av except for to celebrate it for the coming of the Messiah. There's still a few days left for him to come. Otherwise, I hope that you have an easy fast, and I'll see you here in 2 more weeks for Nachamu. And I'll just give you a little preview. After Nachamu, I am taking a little bit of a vacation, so there'll be a little bit of a break from this class. When we come back, we'll be ready to do Silichot. Okay? Take care, everybody.
Thanks. See, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Do you know why not all the fasts are announced?
Well, some of them are easy to understand. Like, the reason that you don't have to announce Tisha B'Av is because we all know that it's coming. We announced Rosh Chodesh, so 9 days later is Tisha B'Av. We know we have special melodies. We say Echa, we say Chazon. Same thing for, you don't have to announce Kippur. You just had Rosh Hashanah. You know Kippur is coming.
Purim, you would know.
Purim, I think you would know Purim is coming. Well, it's the fast of, it comes before, so I'm not so sure. But the other ones, I think the announcement is practical. You might not realize that, hey, it's the 17th of Tammuz this week. You gotta, you just might not realize the Hebrew date. At least that's my suspicion as to why some of them are announced and others are not. But Solomon might have a different idea. What do you think, Solomon? No. Okay.
To confuse the Satan.
If only. If only it was that easy. Okay, everybody. Have a good evening.
Good night. Thank you.